Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I guess I should start with some background so you understand why what happened hit me so hard. My dad was a real piece of work. He cheated on my mom while she was pregnant with me, which should tell you everything you need to know about his character. When I was born, they tried to make it work for a while, but things came to a head during my first Christmas. My mom was in the Navy and had some leave time. She wanted to visit her family for the holidays, but my dad threw a massive fit about her travel plans. They had this huge blowout fight, and after that he just disappeared. No calls, no letters, no birthday cards, nothing. It was like I didn't exist to him. My mom did her best raising me alone while serving in the military, moving us around to different bases. The whole situation always left me feeling angry and abandoned. Fast forward to my junior year of high school, we had this English teacher that literally everyone despised. She was one of those teachers who seemed to get off on making students miserable. She had this condescending way of talking to us, like we were all idiots, and she loved putting people on the spot just to embarrass them. I butted heads with her constantly. She didn't like that I questioned her assignments or spoke up when I thought she was being unfair. She definitely had it out for me, always trying to find ways to make me look stupid in front of the class. One day, we were studying the hero's journey in literature. You know, the whole concept about how heroes in stories go through certain stages of their adventure. She was going around the room asking different students who their personal heroes were. Kids were giving the usual answers, like their parents, athletes, celebrities, whatever. When she got to me, I honestly couldn't think of anyone I really looked up to. Between moving around so much with the military and dealing with my dad's abandonment, I become pretty cynical about the whole idea of heroes. So when she asked me, I just shrugged and said I didn't really have one. That's when this woman decided to cross a line she had no business crossing. She told me that she was going to tell my dad what I'd said. The classroom went dead silent. I felt my face get hot with anger. This woman had no idea what she'd just said or how much it would hurt. She said it like she thought she was being clever or teaching me some kind of lesson. Without even thinking, the words just came out of my mouth. I told her that if she found him, she should let me know so I could punch him in the face. The reaction was immediate. Half the class gasped, a few kids started snickering, and others just stared with their mouths open. My teacher's face went completely white. She clearly hadn't expected that response and had no idea how to handle it. She asked me what I just said, trying to act like she hadn't heard me clearly. I repeated myself, telling her that if she managed to track down my deadbeat father who walked out when I was a baby, she should please give me his address so I could introduce my fist to his face. Everyone in that room knew exactly what I'd said. The girl sitting next to me was covering her mouth, trying not to laugh, and the guy behind me whispered that it was crazy under his breath. The teacher told me that my language was completely inappropriate for the classroom. I shot back that what was inappropriate was a teacher making assumptions about students' family situations and using those assumptions to try to shame them in front of their peers. She opened and closed her mouth a few times like a fish out of water. She clearly wanted to send me to the principal's office or give me detention, but she knew she'd messed up first. If I got in trouble, I could easily explain to the administration that she'd made the comment about contacting my father first. The rest of the class period was incredibly awkward. She avoided making eye contact with me and didn't call on me for anything else. When other students tried to ask questions, her answers were short and distracted. You could tell she was rattled. After that day, she basically pretended I didn't exist. If I raised my hand, she'd look right past me to call on someone else. During group discussions, she'd walk to the other side of the room when she got near my desk. She never tried to put me on the spot or embarrass me again. Word spread quickly through the school. By lunch, half the student body had heard about what happened. Kids who'd had her in previous years were coming up to me saying they wished they'd had the guts to stand up to her like that. Even some of the other teachers heard about it, and I caught a few of them trying not to smile when they saw me in the halls. For the rest of the semester, whenever she tried to give other students a hard time, someone would inevitably ask if she remembered what happened with the hero thing, and she'd back off immediately. She never again made personal comments about students' families or tried to shame anyone using their home life. I found out later from a friend whose mom worked in the school office that my teacher had actually gone to the principal right after class to complain about my disrespectful outburst. But when the principal asked what led up to it, she had to admit she'd made the comment about telling my father first. The principal told her that maybe she should think more carefully about what she says to students before expecting them to be respectful in return. My fiancé and I have been together for 4 years, and we finally decided to tie the knot this winter. We're both in our late 20s, he's finishing his medical residency, and I work in environmental biology. We're not rich, but we saved up enough for a small wedding with 50 guests. The trouble started when we had to choose our venue. My grandmother has been battling health issues and needs a wheelchair, and my fiancé's aunt is also wheelchair bound. This meant we could only pick places that were fully accessible. In our city, there was literally only one venue that met our needs and budget, a cozy indoor space that could hold 50 people max. No outdoor options in winter anyway. My sister is my maid of honor and honestly, my best friend. She's been there for me through everything. The only problem is she has severe dog allergies. Not the sniffly kind, the kind where she gets red, swollen eyes, constant sneezing, and asthma attacks if she's around dogs for more than an hour. She's tried every antihistamine on the market. Nothing works. Then there's my sister-in-law. She's married to my fiancé's brother and has a medical service dog because she had brain cancer 5 years ago. The cancer left her with seizures that happen 3 or 4 times a week. She gets dizzy for about 20 seconds, then goes unconscious for a few minutes. Her dog, a Labrador, can sense the seizures 1 to 2 minutes before they happen, which gives her time to get somewhere safe. I want to be clear, I have nothing against service dogs. They're amazing and necessary, but my sister-in-law is difficult. She constantly tries to correct my fiancé and me about our own professional fields, spouting completely wrong information, then screams at us when we politely disagree. We stay civil because my brother-in-law loves her. Last week we sent out our wedding invitations. We tried to set up a lunch with my sister-in-law to discuss the situation face-to-face, but she cancelled last minute. Since the invites had to go out, I sent her a message explaining everything. I told her how much we wanted her there, but also explained about my sister's allergies. I suggested that since her husband would be right there with her the whole time, maybe she could leave the dog at home for those 5 hours. I even offered to let her bring an additional guest to help watch out for her. The response was immediate and brutal. She called me screaming about how I dared to ask her to leave her medical equipment at home. When I tried to explain about my sister's severe allergies and potential asthma attack, she accused me of being ableist and wanting her to have a seizure and crack her skull open at my wedding. I kept trying to reason with her, mentioning that her husband would be there and we'd offered additional help, but she wouldn't listen. She yelled that her husband wasn't trained like the dog and that I was asking her to risk her life because I cared more about my sister looking pretty in photos. I tried to explain that it wasn't about photos, but about my sister being able to breathe properly. She wouldn't hear it and called me a terrible person who would rather have her die than accommodate her disability. The call ended with her hanging up on me. 20 minutes later, my brother-in-law called. He said he'd heard what happened, and when I asked if she'd told him about my sister's severe allergies, he said that what his wife says goes, and that was his final answer. I tried to mention our attempts at compromise, but he cut me off saying there was no compromise. Either the dog comes or they don't. Then my mother-in-law got involved. She called me the next day, furious and accusing me of trying to exclude family from the wedding. When I explained we weren't excluding anyone but trying to accommodate everyone's medical needs, she called it discrimination for asking someone to leave their service dog at home. I mentioned my sister's medical condition and how she could end up in the hospital, but my mother-in-law suggested that maybe my sister shouldn't come if she couldn't handle being around dogs. I was stunned. When I pointed out that my sister was my maid of honor and this was our wedding day, my mother-in-law said she wouldn't come either if the dog couldn't come, and threatened to tell the rest of the family how we were treating disabled people. That's when I realized I was dealing with someone completely unreasonable. Over the next few days, my sister-in-law started posting on social media about how her ableist sister-in-law was trying to force her to risk her life by leaving her service dog at home. She painted me as some kind of monster who hated disabled people. But here's what she didn't know. I had documentation of everything. Screenshots of our conversations, records of my attempts to compromise, even a letter from my sister's doctor explaining the severity of her allergies. My fiancé and I decided to take a different approach. We contacted the local disability rights organization that my sister-in-law claimed to represent. We explained the situation honestly, two people with conflicting medical needs, a small enclosed space, and our attempts to find middle ground. The representative was very understanding and told us this was actually a common issue where both conditions are legitimate medical concerns. They suggested we consider hiring a professional aid for the person with seizures, which we hadn't thought of. We looked into it and found a certified medical assistant who specialized in seizure disorders. We offered to pay for this person to attend the wedding specifically to help my sister-in-law. When I called to present this solution, my sister-in-law exploded again, demanding to know if I thought some stranger could replace her trained service dog. I tried to explain we were offering professional medical assistance plus her husband's support, but she accused me of still being ableist and said she didn't want some random person touching her. But then my brother-in-law surprised me by saying the solution actually sounded reasonable and that he'd been worried about handling a seizure by himself in a crowded place. My sister-in-law immediately told him not to dare side with us, but he said he wasn't siding with anyone. He was thinking about her safety and that a professional would know exactly what to do. The tide was turning. My mother-in-law even started to waver when she learned we were spending our own money to hire medical assistants. But my sister-in-law wouldn't give up. She demanded we change venues, change the date, or exclude my sister instead. When we refused all of these options, she threatened to show up with the dog anyway and see what happens. That's when I played my final card. I contacted the venue and explained the situation. They confirmed that if someone brought an animal that caused another guest to have a medical emergency, the animal would have to be removed immediately, and the people who brought it could be asked to leave as well. I forwarded this policy to my sister-in-law. She went quiet for 2 days, then my brother-in-law called to accept our offer of the professional medical assistant. He admitted privately that his wife had been using her condition to control situations for years, and he was tired of it. He said he'd make sure she understood that showing up with a dog would get them both kicked out. On the wedding day, my sister-in-law showed up without the dog, but with the biggest attitude. She spent the entire reception making snide comments about how accommodating we were to some people but not others. The medical assistant we hired was amazing, professional, discreet, and my sister-in-law didn't have a single seizure that day. My sister looked beautiful as my maid of honor, with clear eyes and no breathing problems. The wedding was perfect, and most importantly, both women with medical needs were safe and comfortable. 3 months later, my sister-in-law tried to post online about how we forced her to attend our wedding without her service dog and how traumatic it was. But by then, several family members had heard the real story from my brother-in-law, including the part about the professional medical assistant we paid for. Her post got called out immediately by people who knew the truth. She deleted the post within hours. My brother-in-law later told us he was getting counseling to deal with years of manipulation and control. My girlfriend and I have been together for 6 years, and I finally worked up the courage to propose. She said yes, and we decided to throw a small celebration at my parents' house. My parents live in this upscale neighborhood with a homeowners association that's usually pretty reasonable. The houses are spaced far apart, and most neighbors mind their own business. My dad worked his way up from nothing to become a successful lawyer, and my mom's a doctor. They bought this house 15 years ago as their dream home, complete with a beautiful backyard that's perfect for entertaining. The engagement ring was something special. I've been saving for 2 years, working extra shifts at my job as a software developer. It was a classic solitaire diamond that cost me 3 months' salary, but seeing her face light up when I proposed made every penny worth it. So last Saturday we planned this outdoor party in my parents' backyard. Nothing crazy, just about 20 of our closest friends and family. We had some string lights, a small catering setup, and music at a reasonable volume. We checked all the homeowners association rules beforehand and made sure we were within the guidelines for gatherings. Everything was going perfectly. My fiancée was showing off her ring to her college friends, my dad was grilling burgers, and everyone was having a great time. The music was soft background jazz, and we wrapped up the louder activities by 8 in the evening, well before the association's 9 o'clock noise limit. That's when she showed up. This woman from 3 houses down came walking across the lawn like she owned the place. I'd seen her around the neighborhood before, always complaining about something. Last month, she tried to get my parents fined because their grass was allegedly a quarter-inch too long. The month before that, she called the city about my dad's car being parked slightly over their driveway line by maybe 2 inches. She walked right up to us and demanded that the party end immediately. I tried to explain that we were following all the homeowners association rules and that the music wasn't loud, especially since it wasn't even 8:30 yet. She told me she didn't care what time it was and that we were disrupting her evening meditation. She went on about how she'd had enough of our family's constant rule violations. My dad walked over, always the peacemaker, and asked if there was a specific issue we could address. He mentioned that we had made sure to follow all the community guidelines. Karen got even more aggressive and said the issue was that we thought we could do whatever we wanted because we had money. She claimed she was the head of the Homeowners Association Compliance Committee and was shutting the party down. Now, here's the thing. She wasn't actually the head of anything. My parents had been getting the Homeowners Association newsletters for years, and this woman wasn't even on the board. She was just a busybody who appointed herself the neighborhood watch. My fiancé came over to see what was happening, and that's when Karen noticed the ring. She made some nasty comment about us planning to add another spoiled brat to the neighborhood. My fiancé asked politely who this woman was exactly. Karen responded that she was someone who was tired of watching our family flaunt their wealth while the rest of the neighborhood tried to maintain some dignity. Before anyone could react, she grabbed my fiancé's hand and twisted the ring right off her finger. My fiancé yelped in pain and surprise. I shouted at her, asking what the hell she was doing and demanding she give the ring back. She refused and said she wouldn't return it until we promised to break up and stop disturbing her peace with our celebrations. She actually put the ring in her pocket and crossed her arms like she'd won some kind of victory. The entire party stopped. 20 people were staring at this woman who had just committed theft in broad daylight. My dad told her she needed to return the ring immediately or we would call the police. Karen told him to go ahead and call them, claiming she would tell the officers all about our noise violations and how we'd been terrorizing the neighborhood for years. So my dad did exactly that. He called the police while Karen stood there smugly, apparently convinced she was in the right. My fiancée was crying not just from the pain in her finger where Karen had yanked the ring off, but from the shock of having a stranger steal something so precious to her. The police arrived about 10 minutes later. 2 officers, both very professional. One of them said they had received a call about a theft and asked someone to explain what had happened. My dad explained the situation while Karen kept interrupting with accusations about noise violations and property values. The officers listened to everyone's side of the story. The second officer asked Karen directly if she had taken jewelry from my fiancé. Karen admitted that she had confiscated it temporarily to teach us a lesson. The first officer told her that taking someone else's property was theft, regardless of her reasoning. Karen insisted she was within her rights as a homeowners association representative. My mom, who had been quiet up until this point, finally spoke up. She told the officers she had the homeowners association directory and that this woman wasn't on the board, wasn't on any committee, and had no authority whatsoever. The officers asked Karen to return the ring. She refused, claiming she was protecting the neighborhood's integrity. That's when they told her she was under arrest for theft. Karen screamed, that they couldn't arrest her because she was trying to help the community. But they did exactly that. They handcuffed her and put her in the back of the patrol car while she yelled about lawsuits and discrimination. Before they left, one officer returned the ring to my fiancé and took our statements for the report. The rest of our guests were stunned into silence for a few minutes. But then, something amazing happened. Everyone started talking about how crazy the whole situation was, and it actually brought the party together. People were sharing their own stories about difficult neighbors, and we ended up having an even better time than before. The next morning, we found out that Karen had spent the night in jail because she couldn't make bail until Monday. Apparently, this wasn't her first arrest. She had a history of harassment complaints from other neighborhoods where she'd lived. 2 weeks later, we got a letter from the actual Homeowners Association board apologizing for her behavior and clarifying that she had no official position with them. They also mentioned they'd had multiple complaints about her harassing other residents. My fiancée still wears her ring every day, and we tell this story at parties now. The complex I live at has a homeowners association committee made up of 4 residents who volunteer their time to make everyone else's life slightly more annoying with their constant rule changes and passive-aggressive notices. The committee chairwoman is this woman I'll call Karen. She's in her mid-50s, drives a white car with stick-figure family decals, and has never met a manager she didn't want to speak to. She moved in about 2 years ago and immediately inserted herself into every decision the complex makes. The other committee members are basically her yes men at this point. Karen is constantly complaining about something. Kids playing too loud, people parking in guest spots, the landscaping crew starting work at 8 in the morning instead of 9. She's the type of person who calls the office to complain that someone's welcome mat is 2 inches outside the allowed zone. When I found a bright yellow flyer under my door last month, advertising a community pool party extravaganza, I was immediately suspicious. The flyer was covered in clip art of beach balls and palm trees, with Karen's name listed as the event coordinator. It promised an unforgettable afternoon of fun, food, and fellowship for the whole family. The day of the party arrived, and I figured I'd stop by for a few minutes just to see what kind of disaster Karen had put together. I grabbed my swim shorts and a towel and headed down to the pool area around 2 in the afternoon, which was when the party was supposed to be in full swing. What I found was about 20 residents standing around looking confused while a DJ played generic pop music way too loud for a pool area. Karen was standing near the entrance with a clipboard, wearing a sun hat and what looked like a referee shirt. Karen welcomed me to the community pool party and told me to sign in so they could track attendance for future events. I signed the sheet and looked around. There were maybe 15 people there, including a few kids who were already in the pool ignoring the festivities. I asked her where the food setup was. She cheerfully pointed to a small Coleman cooler and told me they had ice cream for the children. The cooler looked like it could hold maybe 6 ice cream sandwiches. When I asked about food for everyone else, she explained that they never said there would be food for adults. She said the flyer clearly stated the amenities. I pulled out my phone and read the flyer again. She was technically right, it never explicitly said food in general, just ice cream for kids. I asked about drinks since it was 90 degrees outside. She told everyone to stay hydrated and pointed out there was a water fountain by the office. The water fountain she was referring to was a 50-yard walk away, and it was one of those old ones that barely produces a trickle of lukewarm water. I told her I wanted to get this straight. She had advertised a pool party, charged everyone an extra $25 in fees this month for community events, and all we got was a DJ, some ice cream for kids, and a cornhole set. She reminded me not to forget about the raffle where they were giving away a premium beach towel. She held up what was clearly a $15 towel from Target with a price tag still on it. By this point, other residents were starting to voice their complaints. A woman with 2 young kids came over looking frustrated and asked about the food because her kids were asking about it. The flyer had made it sound like there would be meals. Karen told her the flyer was very clear about what was provided and suggested maybe she should have read it more carefully. I pointed out that she literally called it a food, fun, and fellowship event on the flyer. Karen corrected me, saying she wrote fun, food, and fellowship and said there was food, the ice cream. An older man who lives in my building joined the conversation and explained he brought his grandkids specifically because the flyer advertised food. They hadn't eaten lunch yet. Karen told him that sounded like a planning issue on his part and said they couldn't be responsible for every family's meal schedule. The DJ, who was clearly uncomfortable with the situation, turned down the music and approached us. He said he didn't want to interrupt, but he was told there would be catering and he hadn't eaten since breakfast. He was supposed to play for 4 hours. Karen told him his contract was with the committee, not with individual residents. If he had concerns, he could take it up with them after the event. The DJ said he was just asking if there was going to be food, like she told him when she booked him. Karen said they never promised him food and said they paid his fee, which should cover his meals. The DJ looked at his contract on his phone and pointed out that it said refreshments would be provided for all attendees and staff. Karen snatched the phone out of his hands and said she needed to review the documentation to resolve this dispute. I asked if she just took his phone. She explained she was reviewing the documentation to resolve the dispute. The DJ demanded his phone back right away. She held on to it while squinting at the screen and claimed the contract appeared to have been modified after they agreed to terms. The DJ said that was the contract she emailed him last week and nothing had been changed. At this point, I'd had enough. I grabbed my own phone and started recording. I told Karen to give him back his phone immediately and explained to everyone why she charged us $25 each for a party with no food, no drinks, and entertainment that she apparently lied to. Karen demanded I stop recording her because it was private property and she didn't consent to being filmed. I explained that this was actually common area that we all pay for, and she was a volunteer committee member at a community event. This was absolutely my right. The crowd was growing now, with more residents coming over to see what the commotion was about. Karen was getting red-faced and flustered. She threatened to have me removed from the property if I didn't stop recording. I asked her by who, pointing out she wasn't security or management, just a resident who volunteers to send out passive-aggressive emails about pool rules. The older resident agreed with me and asked what exactly she spent our money on. Karen explained the DJ fee was substantial and they had to purchase supplies for the raffle and games. The DJ reminded her she paid him $200 and he still needed his phone back. I did quick math. For 25 residents, that was $625 collected. I asked where the other $425 went. Karen finally handed the DJ his phone back, but she was clearly panicking now. She claimed there were other expenses like decorations, permits, and administrative costs. I looked around and asked what decorations, pointing out I only saw some dollar store streamers. I also asked what permits you need for a pool party in your own complex. The woman with the kids had been doing math on her phone and announced that if there were 40 units in this complex and Karen charged everyone $25, that was $1,000. All for a $200 DJ and maybe $50 worth of ice cream and decorations. The crowd was getting larger and more agitated. Someone had called the property management office and the actual manager showed up looking confused. He asked what was going on because he got a call about some kind of disturbance. I explained that Karen had collected money from residents for a community party, spent maybe a quarter of it on the actual event, and wouldn't account for where the rest went. The manager asked Karen if this was true. Karen said there had been a misunderstanding and some residents had unrealistic expectations about community events. The manager asked to see receipts for how the money was spent. Karen said she didn't have to provide financial records to individual residents because that was committee business. The manager corrected her, explaining that as the property manager, he did need to see how community funds were spent. It was in the lease agreement. Karen said she would get him that information later. The older resident asked what about right now, pointing out there were a bunch of hungry kids and upset families present. The manager looked around at the sad state of the party, the overpriced DJ playing to an increasingly hostile crowd, the handful of melting ice cream sandwiches, and the lone beach towel sitting on a plastic table. The manager told Karen he thought they needed to wrap this up and refund everyone's money. Karen absolutely refused, saying the event was delivered as advertised. I asked if it really was because her flyer promised food, fun, and fellowship, and all we got was corporate music and the privilege of watching her pocket our money. The DJ offered to pack up early since this didn't seem to be going well. The manager agreed that was probably best and told Karen to see him in the office immediately after this. Karen complained this was ridiculous because she had volunteered countless hours to make this community better, and this was the thanks she got. I pointed out that she collected money under false pretenses and then acted like we were unreasonable for expecting basic party refreshments. The mom with kids announced her kids were hungry and cranky and they were going home, but she wanted her $25 back. The crowd murmured in agreement, and several people started chanting for refunds. Karen finally gave in and said everyone would get their money back, but not to expect any more community events from her. The older resident asked if that was a promise. The manager escorted Karen away while the DJ packed up his equipment. 2 days later, everyone got checks for $25 under their doors, along with a formal apology from the management company. Karen was quietly removed from the committee, and we later found out she'd been asked to consider other living arrangements after they discovered she'd been skimming money from other community funds as well. I got into IT straight out of college when my cousin helped me land this job at his company. I was the sole IT guy responsible for maintaining their internal server system that basically ran everything: payroll, inventory management, shipping labels, you name it. The warehouse operated around the clock, but corporate office hours were Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. The company had grown pretty fast over the past few years, which meant they'd hired a lot of new management without really updating their processes. That's where our antagonist comes in. Let's call her Karen. She'd been hired as some kind of operations director about 6 months earlier and had this habit of treating IT like her personal tech support team. Every month, I had to do scheduled maintenance on our main server. This wasn't optional. If I didn't do regular updates and system checks, we'd eventually have much bigger problems. I always scheduled these for Sunday evenings when nobody was working and sent out notices well in advance. This month, I'd sent out 3 separate emails about the Sunday night maintenance window. The first one went out 2 weeks prior, the second one a week before, and a final reminder on Friday afternoon. Standard procedure. I got the usual acknowledgments from most departments, and nobody raised any objections. Sunday evening rolled around and I did the maintenance as planned. Everything went smoothly, updated the system, ran diagnostics. Everything was back online by midnight. Perfect. Monday morning, I'm at my desk with my coffee, feeling pretty good about the smooth maintenance window, when I get this email from Karen at 9:47 a.m. The subject line was urgent and demanded that I take the server offline immediately for scheduled maintenance. She insisted this needed to happen during business hours so she could oversee the process personally. I stared at my screen for a solid 30 seconds. I forwarded her the 3 previous emails about the maintenance that had already been completed, along with the status report showing everything was running normally. I replied explaining that the scheduled maintenance was completed yesterday evening as announced and that all systems were currently operational. I asked if there was a specific issue she wanted me to address. Her response came back in less than 5 minutes. She told me she didn't care what I thought I did yesterday and that I needed to do it now. She said I should be working on her schedule, not some random time I picked, and demanded I get it done immediately. Karen had a reputation for being difficult. She'd been hired from outside the company and seemed to think that gave her authority over everyone. The warehouse guys couldn't stand her, and even the other managers rolled their eyes when her name came up. But this was different. This wasn't just being difficult. This was actively demanding something that would hurt the business. Taking our server offline during peak business hours would be catastrophic. I decided to give her one more chance to understand what she was asking for. I sent another email explaining that taking the server offline during business hours would temporarily halt access to the shipping system, inventory management, time tracking, and payroll processing. I told her this would affect every department and could result in significant business disruption. I asked her to confirm that she wanted me to proceed with this action. I figured laying out the problems in black and white would make her reconsider. She replied saying yes, I heard her correctly and that I should be working on her schedule. She told me to get it done now and said she didn't want to hear any more excuses. That's when it hit me. She wanted malicious compliance. She was about to get it. I immediately called the warehouse manager and gave him a heads up. I told him that, per urgent request from operations management, I'd be taking the main server offline at 10:30 a.m. for maintenance. I suggested he might want to let his guys know they wouldn't be able to access the shipping system or track inventory for a while. The warehouse manager asked what was going on, wondering why I was doing maintenance during business hours when I'd just done it yesterday. He thought it seemed unusual. I explained that the request came directly from operations with explicit approval despite my warnings about business disruption. He wasn't happy, but he understood I was just following orders. At exactly 10:30 a.m. I walked over to the server room and pulled the plug. Then I sent out a company-wide email explaining that the server was down for emergency maintenance as requested by operations management and that I would provide updates when they became available. The chaos started almost immediately. By 10:45 a.m. the phones were ringing constantly. The shipping department couldn't print labels. The warehouse couldn't update inventory. Nobody could clock in or out for lunch breaks. Customer service couldn't track orders. At 11 a.m. sharp, the CFO burst into my office. He demanded to know what the hell was going on and why our entire system was down in the middle of a Monday morning. I pulled up the email chain and turned my monitor toward him. I explained that I'd received urgent instructions from operations management to take the server offline immediately despite my warnings about business disruption. I showed him the complete email thread. He looked through about 5 different expressions when he read through the messages. He asked if she actually approved this, after I specifically warned her about the problems. I confirmed that yes, I tried to explain the impact, but she insisted it needed to happen on her schedule. The CFO just shook his head and walked out. By 11:15 a.m., Karen came storming into my office. She was practically shaking with anger. She demanded to know what I thought I was doing and told me to get that system back online right now. I explained that I was following her explicit written instructions to perform server maintenance during business hours and that the maintenance was currently in progress. She said this was ridiculous and claimed she didn't know it would cause all these problems. I reminded her that I'd specifically outlined all of these potential issues in my response to her request and that she'd confirmed she wanted me to proceed despite the business disruption. She started yelling about how I should have known better and how this was all my fault for not explaining things properly. I just sat there and let her vent while I continued working on the server diagnostics. I told her I could restore service early if she'd like, but it would take additional time to properly reboot all systems and verify there were no issues from the forced shutdown during peak usage hours. That seemed to deflate her a bit. She demanded to know how long it would take, and I told her probably another hour to do it safely. The fallout was swift. That afternoon, Karen got called into a closed-door meeting with the Chief Operating Officer and Chief Technology Officer. I heard it didn't go well for her. The COO was not amused to learn that we'd lost thousands of dollars in productivity because someone couldn't be bothered to read their emails. Within a week, the company implemented a new change management process. Any urgent IT requests from management now required approval from at least 2 department heads and had to include a business impact assessment. Karen started avoiding me completely after that. She'd walk the long way around the office just to avoid passing my desk. When she did have to interact with IT, she went through other people. My next paycheck had a nice little bonus attached with a note from the CTO thanking me for maintaining professionalism during a difficult operational situation. Several people had vouched for how I'd handled the whole mess. About 3 months later, Karen transferred to a different division. I heard her new role had significantly less authority over other departments. Pure coincidence, I'm sure. And now we have have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.